Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Transmigrated to a medieval Pokémon world. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 101, Zoroark. Double Team, a normal type move. It creates numerous identical copies of the user, confusing the opponent's senses before striking when their guard is down or disrupting their judgment. A swarm of Zoroa surrounded Dratini, cutting off every escape route. Dratini's eyes darted around warily, its slender body tense like a drawn bowstring. Lucian focused all his attention, carefully scanning the battlefield, trying to distinguish the real Zoroa from its illusions and relay that to Dratini. But Anna clearly had no intention of giving him the chance. Zoroa, use extrasensory. All of you. In the next instant, every Zoroa moved at once. Invisible power condensed into dozens of translucent spheres, hurtling toward Dratini from all directions. Fast, too fast. And worse, Anna's Zoroa had refined its illusion to the point where even the shadow clones appeared tangible. To an untrained eye, every single one looked real. Lucian reacted instantly. Dratini, jump, now. But even so, he was a heartbeat too late. The blasts of psychic energy struck Dratini squarely, enveloping it in shimmering waves of force. Drat. Dratini cried out in pain, its body trembling under the barrage. Zoroa, one more extrasensory. Anna commanded sharply. The copies hesitated for only a fraction of a second before moving again, but that brief pause was all Lucian needed. Dratini, front left, twister. Dra. Despite its injuries, Dratini drew in a deep breath. Violet light flared from its mouth, coalescing into a roaring spiral of wind and dragon energy. The raging twister collided head-on with Zoroa's psychic blast. For a moment, the two forces fought for dominance, then Zoroa's psychic power shattered the cyclone apart, sending Dratini flying through the air. Drat. It hit the ground hard, struggling to rise, but its strength finally gave out, and it collapsed. Lucian rushed forward, kneeling beside it. You did well, Dratini. Rest now. He gently fed it an oranberry tonic and stroked its head. Only then did he look back at Anna, his tone calm but serious. Anna. From here on, I'm going to get serious now. At his signal, Servine stepped forward, elegant and composed. It regarded Zoroa with its usual air of disdain, emerald eyes glinting with quiet confidence. Seeing the Pokémon before her, Anna's chest tightened. After so many encounters, she could roughly gauge an opponent's strength, and she knew that Lucian Servine was his strongest partner by far. We're not giving up, she declared, clenching her fists. Zoroa barked sharply in agreement. Thus began the second match. Zoroa, double team, then use extrasensory. Anna shouted, eager to repeat her earlier success. But this time, her opponent wasn't the still maturing Dratini. As the illusionary Zoroa once again encircled Servine, Lucian spoke softly, almost lazily. Magical Leaf. In that instant, both Pokémon launched their attacks. Psychic energy surged toward Servine, yet before it could land, countless glowing leaves burst forth, whirling through the air with razor precision. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The leaves sliced through the false images one after another until only the real Zoroa remained. Servine lowered itself, body coiling gracefully before darting aside like a striking serpent, the extrasensory grazing harmlessly past. Then the storm of leaves locked onto Zoroa's true form. WHSSSH. A flurry of sharp green light struck its target, leaving several clear gashes along Zoroa's fur. So fast. Anna gasped, her eyes wide. Lucian's expression softened. I understand your resolve, Anna, but I can't allow you to set foot on the battlefield. His voice grew firm. Servine, Vine Whip. Two thick vines lashed out from Servine's sides, snapping through the air toward Zoroa. Anna's heart skipped a beat. Zoroa, dodge! But before Zoroa could move, it felt its paws tighten, caught by a tangle of living grass. Grass not. Anna realized too late. The vines came down hard, striking Zoroa squarely and driving it to its knees. No! Anna cried out. Zoroa trembled, teeth clenched, refusing to yield. It turned its gaze toward Anna, toward the girl who shared its dream. Anna! I feel your heart. You're not the only one who wants to protect this place. Even I, a Pokémon, want to defend this home where humans and monsters can live in peace. Zoroa let out a sharp, determined cry. The next instant, a blinding, radiant white light burst forth from its body, soaring toward the sky. Within that light, Zoroa's silhouette began to shift and change rapidly. It slowly rose to its feet, its short forelimbs stretched into powerful claws, and a thick mane of crimson fur unfurled from its head, cascading down its back like living fire. That was evolution. Zoroa had evolved into Zoroark. Lucian's eyes narrowed. Across from him, Anna's face lit up with unrestrained joy as she watched the glow fade. Zoroa, she whispered, trembling with excitement. The newly evolved Zoroark gave a low, rumbling growl before turning to Anna and nodding silently, its eyes gleaming with understanding. Then, it looked back toward Servine, its gaze sharp and focused. In the next second, Zoroark's eyes glimmered with a strange, bewitching violet light. Lucian's expression hardened. Not good. After evolving, Zoroark's illusion ability became vastly more powerful. It was about to weave another illusion, strong enough to trap even experienced opponents. Servine, close your eyes and stay calm. Lucian ordered quickly. Servine obeyed at once. Darkness swallowed its vision. The sounds around it faded, one by one, until there was nothing, no wind, no footsteps, no voice. When Servine opened its eyes again, it found itself standing alone in the middle of a vast, endless forest. Servine! Wake up! Lucian's voice called out, but the Pokémon stood frozen in place, its eyes glazed over, completely unresponsive. It was trapped, ensnared in one of Zoroark's illusions. That was Zoroark's true power. In its earlier stage, Zoroa's illusions had been shallow, mere visual tricks. But once it evolved, this ability grew exponentially. Now, Zoroark could not only transform its own form, but also project illusions on a massive scale, creating vivid mirages that hundreds of people could see simultaneously. It was said that wild Zoroark punished those who tried to capture them by trapping their minds within endless hallucinations. When their forest homes were threatened, they would conjure illusions so realistic that intruders would wander in circles for days, never realizing they'd lost their way. Unless one possessed a will of steel, or psychic power greater than Zoroark's own, there was no escape from its illusions. Chapter 102, The Reason for Battle. Inside the illusion, Servine wandered aimlessly through the dense, endless forest. It kept its composure, thinking carefully, trying to find a way out of this mirage. But then, out of the mist ahead, it saw a familiar, regal silhouette. A superior. The majestic form glided gracefully between the trees, its scales gleaming faintly in the dappled light. Suddenly, it turned its head, as if sensing Servine's gaze. For an instant, their eyes met. Servine immediately dropped into a battle stance. No, something was wrong. Superior should not be here. Then it remembered the fox's ability. Illusions. Zoroark's illusions. Everything around it was fake. The forest, the superior, all of it had been crafted to trap Servine inside and make Lucian lose the battle. Servine's sharp instincts caught on quickly. It scanned the surroundings, searching for a flaw in the illusion or a hidden exit, but no matter how long it searched, there was none. Finally, Servine found itself once more facing the majestic figure of Superior. Servi. It paused, thinking. Then an idea sparked, bold and daring. Could it be that the only way to break this illusion was to defeat the Superior that represented its deepest fear? Lucian was still waiting outside. Servine clenched its jaw. it had to escape, no matter what. Lowering itself, it darted forward in a low serpentine glide, rushing toward Superior. But the regal serpent merely looked down at it with disdain, pride shimmering in its eyes. It opened its mouth slightly, forming a sphere of green energy that exploded outward in a violent blast. Boom! The blast struck Servine head-on, hurling it backward. Servine! Pain seared through its body, but Servine grit its teeth, determination blazing in its eyes. That attack had not broken its will. It had only ignited its pride. It would not fall here. Servine lunged forward again. 3 seconds later, it was blasted back once more. Still, it rose again. Once, twice, 3 times, again and again, Servine charged the illusionary Superior, refusing to give in. Every lesson Lucian had ever taught echoed through its mind: Grass Knot, Vine Whip, Magical Leaf. Over and over, Servine fought, learned, adapted. On the 382nd attempt, it darted forward once more. This time, it skimmed the ground, narrowly evading Superior's energy sphere, then leapt high, twisting midair to dodge a strike of Vine Whip. After 300 battles, Servine knew Superior's every move, its timing, its patterns, its arrogance. Even before Superior moved, Servine could already predict the next attack. Servine! With a fierce cry, Servine unleashed everything it had left. A storm of glowing magical leaves erupted around it, swirling into a deadly green whirlwind that rained down upon Superior. The explosion of light shook the entire forest. When the dust settled, the majestic Superior collapsed to the ground, and the illusion began to crumble. The forest fractured like shattered glass. Servine landed gracefully, panting heavily, and looked around. The world was dissolving. It had done it. It had broken free. Teacher, we're going to win this time. Anna's voice was bright and confident. Now you can't stop me and Zoroark from joining the Knights anymore. All of this, the battle and the forest, had unfolded in Servine's mind. Inside the illusion, what felt like hours had passed, but in the real world, barely a minute had gone by. Lucian's expression softened. You're not afraid of war, Anna? I only know that if we don't fight back, Anna said, her eyes shining with conviction, the enemy will come here and destroy everything we've built. Everyone will die, and our home will be gone. So, Prince Lucian, I want to protect it. I want to fight for you and for this land. She thought of her mother's stories about war, about what it cost, yet her voice held no hesitation. Lucian sighed quietly. In another age, perhaps in the modern world, Anna might have been like Ash and his friends, carefree, traveling across the regions with her Pokémon, dreaming instead of fighting. But in this world, she was right. The weak had no protection. War showed no mercy. Looking at the newly evolved Zoroark standing proudly beside her, Lucian exhaled. I understand your resolve. Anna's eyes widened. Then, teacher, you mean? At that moment, Servine's body twitched slightly. Lucian immediately noticed what was happening. His Servine had broken free from the illusion that Zoroark had created. However, Lucian said calmly, the battle isn't over yet. He raised his hand and gave his command. Magical Leaf. In an instant, countless glowing leaves spun up around Servine, forming a swirling storm of green energy that shot straight toward Zoroark. Although Zoroa had evolved, the Pokémon world was not like an RPG where leveling up automatically restored stamina. Before evolving, Zoroa had already taken several heavy hits from Servine's Vine Whip, Magical Leaf, and Grass Knot. This final surprise attack hit Zoroark squarely, carving several deep gashes across its body. The newly evolved Zoroark staggered, then finally collapsed to the ground. Anna's eyes widened in disbelief. Her small face twisted in a mix of shock and outrage. Teacher! That's cheating, she cried. You made a fatal mistake, Lucian replied with a faint smile. No matter the situation, you should never underestimate your opponent. And more importantly, letting a child go to war is not something a responsible ruler should ever do. Servine returned to Lucian's side. Well done, Servine, Lucien said, his tone approving. Servine raised its head proudly. It knew its place in the team well. It was the strongest of Lucien's Pokémon and bore the responsibility that came with that strength. But seeing this, Anna looked as if she was about to cry. Damn it! She shouldn't have let her guard down. Still, she quickly pulled herself together. Teacher, no matter what, I'm going to fight, she said firmly. Whether you agree or not. Lucien fell silent for a moment. After a brief pause for thought, he finally spoke again. In that case, I'll give you 5 months. 5 months from now, we'll battle again. If you can defeat me then, I'll consider letting you join the Knights. 5 months? Anna repeated, thinking it over. Then she nodded. It's a deal. Of course, Lucien replied. I'll train hard with Zorua, no, with Zoroark now, and will definitely defeat you next time, she declared, clenching her fists in determination. Lucien sighed softly. When that time came, it probably wouldn't be so easy anymore. I'll need to balance my duties in the territory with training my Pokémon more seriously, he thought. After all, even if it was a bit unfair that he had fought 2 against 1 earlier, he could never truly allow a 10-year-old girl to step onto a battlefield. Lately, he had been too busy managing affairs within the territory and hadn't spent much time training his Pokémon. In contrast, Anna had been out every day following his methods, battling wild Pokémon and honing her skills. They had started from the same point, but now she was catching up, fast. Lucien looked at the 2 Pokémon beside him and said, starting tomorrow, we're going to begin real combat training. Simple practice alone was no longer enough. They needed the experience of actual battles. Chapter 103, Cooperation. The next day, after finishing his duties in the territory, Lucien immediately set out with Dratini and Servine for field combat training. This time, he had chosen their opponents carefully, a group of Raticate, the evolved form of Rattata. Raticate looked like oversized rats, often standing upright on their hind legs. Their fur was a light brownish yellow, and their most striking feature was their large, constantly growing front teeth, which they used for both attack and foraging. Although they did not look particularly dangerous, their temper was far more violent than their appearance suggested. Within just a few rounds, both Dratini and Servine were already covered with several visible scratches. The plains were teeming with Raticate. Whenever Lucien knocked one out, more would swarm toward them almost immediately. Lucien remained calm and composed, giving orders to coordinate the 2 Pokémon's teamwork. But it quickly became obvious that Servine's pride refused to allow it to rely on Dratini's help. It slithered forward on its own, attacking with Vine Whip and Magical Leaf while keeping the smaller Dratini protected behind it. The approach worked well against the Raticate swarm, but the results were easy to see. Servine was taking unnecessary hits that could have been avoided with cooperation. By the time the battle ended and the Raticate were driven away, Dratini was almost unharmed, while Servine was covered in cuts and bruises. Lucien sighed quietly to himself. So this was Servine's one flaw. When it had been a Snivy, it was simply proud and aloof. But once it evolved, that pride solidified into an unshakable sense of superiority. According to later research, newly evolved Servine often needed time to adapt before they could work well with other Pokémon. It was a well-known behavioral trait. Lucien looked at the proud Servine but said nothing. Instead, he turned and began searching for stronger wild Pokémon. Before long, he found them, a herd of wild buffalo grazing on the plains. There were about 20 of them in total, and the leading few were enormous, with powerful muscles and glossy black fur that shimmered in the sunlight. Even from a distance, their sheer presence radiated strength. Using a few clever tactics, Lucien managed to lure 3 of them away from the herd. As the 3 buffalo charged toward them, Servine and Dratini instantly readied themselves for battle. Servine extended 2 vine whips, trying to block the buffalo's powerful headbutt attack, but the force behind the impact ripped the vines apart. Servi? Servine's eyes widened in surprise. Before it could react, the other 2 buffalo followed close behind, thundering across the grass. At that critical moment, Lucien's voice cut through the chaos. Dratini, Thunder Wave. A surge of golden electricity erupted from Dratini's body, arcing through the air and wrapping around the two Buffalant. In an instant, their bodies stiffened, paralyzed by the electric current. Don't just stand there, Servine. Use grass knot. Lucian commanded firmly. Servine snapped out of its shock. It pressed one hand to the ground, channeling grass-type energy into the soil. At the Buffalant's hooves, thick green vines sprouted, weaving together and tangling around their legs. Just as the Buffalant began to recover from paralysis and attempted another charge, they were tripped by the vines and fell hard to the ground. The impact sent tremors through the earth, and both Buffalant let out pained cries. Under Lucian's precise command and the teamwork between the two Pokémon, the three wild Buffalants soon lost their will to fight. Lucian approached them carefully, tending to their injuries first. Then he placed a few berries in front of them as an apology before watching them retreat into the distance. Only then did he turn back to his own Pokémon. Servine, did you feel it? Lucian asked as he handed both of them some medicine. Servi? Servine tilted its head slightly. In that battle just now, what would have happened if Dratini hadn't used Thunder Wave to stop those Buffalant? Servine fell silent. It didn't need to think hard. With the raw power of those Buffalant, if one of them had rammed into it, Servine would have been sent flying instantly. Lucian noticed the conflicted expression on its face and chose his words carefully. Listen, he said gently, you don't have to shoulder everything on your own. Maybe before you met me, you had to survive by yourself, so you got used to fighting alone. But now, you're no longer alone, Lucian said softly. You have me and Dratini. We're your partners, your teammates, and even your family. I know you think Dratini is still weak compared to you, he continued gently, so you feel it's natural to protect it and face every danger by yourself. Beside them, Dratini looked up at Servine with its big, glistening eyes. Woo! Servi. But Servine, Lucian said, that won't do. The strength of a single Pokémon will never surpass what two can achieve together. So, can you try to trust us a little more? Servine stared at Lucian, stunned for a moment. Then, after a long silence, it turned its head aside. Servine. Lucian smiled faintly. He understood. That was Servine's way of saying yes. It would try to work with Dratini from now on. Good. Then let's keep training. Over the next few hours of training, Lucian noticed the change almost immediately. Servine no longer fought alone. It began coordinating its attacks with Dratini, learning to time its movements and leave openings for its partner. Dratini was still small and inexperienced, but its Thunder Wave and Dragon Tail were excellent control moves, creating perfect chances for Servine to strike. By the end of the day's grueling training, both Pokémon had grown stronger, physically and in spirit. After dinner, Lucian took them, along with Larvesta and several Minccino, to a forest hot spring for a well-earned soak. The forest spring was always full of life. Many wild Pokémon gathered here, and although they came from different species, it was as if an unspoken truce existed within this place. No one fought here. Everyone simply came to rest. Steam rose from the warm, crystal-clear water, drifting lazily into the evening air. In the distance, thin trails of smoke curled up from the chimneys of Lucian's territory. Dratini floated lazily on the surface, its body gliding peacefully through the water. Servine, eyes closed, rested quietly beside it, enjoying the calm and the warmth easing its tired muscles. Larvesta, who hated water, stayed obediently on a flat rock near the edge, dozing lightly. The heat was enough for it, getting wet would ruin its soft fur. The Minccino, however, were having the time of their lives. They jumped into the hot spring one after another, splashing and scrubbing their fluffy tails in the warm water. After all, Lucian would help dry them off later anyway. Lucian himself leaned back against a smooth boulder, closing his eyes. Together with his Pokémon, he allowed himself a rare, quiet moment of peace. He wasn't worried about danger tonight, the knights were patrolling nearby. Chapter 104, Larvesta's Unparalleled Talent. Lucian's field training was paying off. After 2 full weeks of non-stop, grueling drills, both Dratini and Servine had grown remarkably. Especially Dratini. Its near-daily shedding was proof of just how fast it was maturing. It had recently mastered new moves, Agility, Slam, and Dragon Pulse, adding them to the ones it already knew, Wrap, Leer, Twister, Thunder Wave, and Dragon Tail. 8 moves in total. Servine's progress was even greater. Half a month of intense training had allowed it to learn Energy Ball, Leech Seed, Giga Drain, and Slam. Not bad, Lucian murmured with satisfaction. At this rate, Servine might evolve into superior soon. He looked at his Pokémon and smiled. Alright, you two. Take the rest of the day off. We'll resume training tomorrow. Woo! Dratini had no objections. Whatever Lucian said, it followed obediently. Servine said nothing, but its expression betrayed a trace of awe. Even it could feel how much stronger it had become over the past few weeks. Before meeting Lucian, it never would have believed such growth was possible in so short a time. Servine. Lucian caught that hint of wonder in its eyes and chuckled. If you keep it up, you'll become even stronger. In this age where formal Pokémon training methods didn't yet exist, even the simplest techniques from Lucian's knowledge of the future were overwhelmingly effective. After all, people in this era barely understood Pokémon at all. They didn't know about types, moves, or even type advantages. Hearing his words, Servine's eyes burned with renewed determination. No Pokémon could resist the desire to grow stronger. Lucian's gaze then drifted toward Larvesta, who sat nearby. Over these past days, its affection for him had risen from 80 to a full 100. So this was the benefit of hatching a Pokémon personally, he thought with a smile. A Pokémon's bond with the first person it sees upon hatching was something truly special. When Lucian beckoned, Larvesta eagerly scuttled over, its fuzzy body bouncing like a happy puppy. It looked up at him with bright blue eyes, clear, trusting, and full of warmth. Lucian reached down and gently patted its head. Despite being an insect Pokémon, its fur was unbelievably soft and fluffy, almost addictive to the touch. He even had the urge to bury his face in that snowy fur. Now that he thought about it, Larvesta was growing surprisingly fast. In just 7 days, it had already reached about 1.2 meters in height. Even as a larva, this Larvesta's strength was clearly extraordinary. After all, it was the descendant of a Pokémon of legendary power. Larvesta, Lucian said with a grin, how about we go for a walk? Larv. Larvesta let out a cheerful chirp, clearly delighted. Good. Then let's go. Lucian laughed. Dratini and Servine were exhausted, so he let them rest at home for the day. With Larvesta by his side, Lucian stepped out into the evening. It was early May, and the air had turned pleasantly warm, not hot, but gentle and comfortable. A soft breeze swept across the open plains, bringing with it the earthy scent of spring. The sun was already setting, but the workers and their Machoke assistants were still busy building the town. Sweat glistened on their foreheads, yet every face bore a smile. Your Highness Lucian, someone called out upon seeing him. Lucian waved back with a kind smile. Don't push yourselves too hard. Make sure to rest. Yes, sir, the workers chorused. Passing through the half-built streets, Lucian and Larvesta eventually reached a wide, open field bathed in the orange glow of sunset. Lucian wanted to gauge Larvesta's true strength. After glancing over the list of moves it had already mastered, he said. Alright, Larvesta, let me see what you've got. Use Flamethrower. Pokémon instinctively understood how to perform moves written deep within their genes. Even though this was the first time Larvesta had heard the name Flamethrower, it immediately grasped Lucian's intent. Larv. At his command, the 5 crimson horns on Larvesta's head began to glow brighter and hotter. Intense fire-type energy gathered at their tips, and in the next moment, 5 jets of blazing flame erupted simultaneously. The streams merged into a single, massive torrent of fire that roared forward, scorching everything in its path. The grass before them blackened instantly, leaving behind a charred trail across the field. Lucian's pupils contracted sharply. That power, there was no way such a destructive flamethrower could come from a Pokémon still in its larval stage. What's going on? Could it be because Volcarona passed on a fragment of its essence when laying the egg? If that's true, then just how strong is this Larvesta, even at its current stage? Lucian stared, momentarily speechless. Meanwhile, Larvesta was looking up at him eagerly, its expression shining with expectation, as if waiting for praise. You did great, Larvesta. Lucian said at once. Vesta. Larvesta cheered happily, hopping in place, clearly delighted. Next, Lucian had it demonstrate several more moves. Fiery Dance, Flame Charge, Fire Spin, and Sunny Day. Each time, Larvesta would only continue after Lucian praised it. Well done, Larvesta. He chuckled, patting its head. He was genuinely impressed by its performance. With proper training, Larvesta could easily become his greatest source of defense, and perhaps even offense. As the sun sank low, Lucian sat beside Larvesta for a while longer, enjoying the soft warmth radiating from its body. Then, together, they returned home. That evening, the maids served dinner, ham and bread sandwiches, mashed potatoes, 2 grilled fish, several steamed egg custards, and a few glasses of berry juice. The bread was made from the territory's own wheat, freshly milled and baked to a soft, fragrant sweetness. The mashed potatoes, sprinkled with sesame seeds, had a rich and creamy flavor. After eating a few bites, Lucian suddenly remembered something. He asked one of the maids to summon Elif, the steward. Finishing his meal casually, he let the Pokémon relax in the house while he headed to the Lord's Hall. Your Highness, do you have instructions for me? Elif asked as he arrived, still wiping his hands. How many seeds did we purchase from the traveling merchants last time? Lucian asked. Oh, that matter? Elif relaxed a little, realizing it wasn't an emergency. We bought high-quality wheat and rice seeds, along with a good number of vegetable seeds. Chapter 105, Gathering Grain. Rice, wheat. Lucian murmured, falling into thought. Even if the war hasn't reached us yet, we still need to prepare in advance. Rice was a new crop for his territory. It could be cultivated into one of the most important staples of all, cooked rice. And if they built proper rice paddies, Pokémon like Swampert or Garchomp could be raised in them. These Pokémon would prey on the common pests infesting the fields, maintaining a natural ecological balance. Pass on my orders, Lucian said. Tell the farmers and the Doug trio to expand cultivation as much as possible and sow every seed we have. Yes, Your Highness. Elif nodded respectfully. Lucian leaned back slightly, recalling what he knew of the manor-based economies of this era. From the memories of this body's original owner, he knew that the foundation of feudal economics lay in self-sufficient production. Every manor operated to sustain itself rather than trade. The main pillars were agriculture, livestock, and handicrafts. But agriculture was woefully inefficient. Without fertilizers, machinery, or advanced tools, people relied almost entirely on Pokémon labor. Animal husbandry was much like the Middle Ages. Farmers raised poultry and livestock, while Pokémon served as beasts of burden. Human slaves had it even worse, ranked beneath Pokémon in status. Handicrafts were small-scale, mills for grinding grain, blacksmiths for forging tools and weapons, women spinning cloth and weaving fabric, and brewers making ale and wine for limited trade. Most of the yield stayed within the territory. About 50 to 70% of the farmers' production went toward their own survival, feeding livestock, and supporting the lord's estate. The rest was tribute. Lucian frowned. Such systems were outdated and restrictive. With Pokémon's help, productivity had already multiplied several times over. Ordinary people could finally break free from endless field labor. Pokémon products, Combi honey, Petalo leaves, Mareep wool, could all be traded to enrich the territory. He picked up a quill and began writing swiftly across a sheet of parchment. When he was done, he handed it to Elif. I plan to introduce reforms to maximize production. His plan proposed that all farmland would be distributed among the farmers, who would pay steady annual taxes to sustain the territory.
At the same time, Lucien would encourage citizens to raise Pokémon and use their resources, honey, silk, wool, berries, for brewing, tailoring, and trade, building a thriving economy of exchange.
Elif read the document carefully, his eyes widening. Your Highness, this is revolutionary. Lucien smiled faintly. Elif, can't you see?
The old world no longer fits the new one.
Sooner or later, monsters will completely transform how we live.
He leaned forward slightly, his tone calm but firm. When that time comes, famine, barren lands, and drought will be things of the past.
No one will starve. Farmers won't have to toil endlessly just to survive.
When that era arrives, old systems will have no place here.
But for now, we'll move step by step.
Elif was silent for a long moment. He recalled how, in just a few short months, the common folk had begun to change. Perhaps because they'd seen the wonders of monsters, many had started approaching small, gentle wild ones, offering them food, even inviting them to live together within the settlement. If someone had told him this would happen back in the royal capital, he never would have believed it. But here, under Lucien's leadership, it was real. People's lives were improving, and hope was spreading.
At that moment, several footsteps echoed outside the hall. Lucien looked up to see Evan and Geralt entering.
Both men bowed respectfully.
Your Highness Lucien, you called for us? Evan, I have a task for you.
Lucien handed him the map he'd received from Zack.
I need you to visit this village and gather information about a particular monster.
Evan lowered his head to look.
The map marked a small settlement labeled Lacunosa Village.
It appeared to be a quiet border village, nothing special at first glance.
Lacunosa Village? Evan asked curiously. Is there something important there? Lucien nodded. An ice-type monster called Kurum is said to dwell nearby. I need you to verify the local stories about it.
This matter is very important.
The seriousness in Lucien's tone made Evan's heart tighten.
His Highness was entrusting him with such a critical mission. It was a sign of true trust. Evan straightened, determination flashing in his eyes.
Understood, Your Highness.
I'll complete this mission without fail. Lucien smiled faintly, then turned his gaze toward Geralt. How are things progressing? He asked. We've located the habitat of those monsters you mentioned, the Aran, Geralt reported.
The knights have been trying to approach them using your method. So far, though, only 2 have agreed to follow us. 2 Arans, huh? Lucien thought for a moment. If feeding them isn't enough to gain their trust, try another approach, he said.
Tell them that if they choose to follow you, you'll help them grow stronger, to evolve into powerful magical beast.
If they doubt you, challenge them. Show them your strength.
Many Pokémon, like humans, only acknowledge those who prove themselves through battle. It was the same principle trainers in his old world followed, earning a Pokémon's respect through strength and bond. Fortunately, his knights were well trained.
Against unevolved Pokémon like Aran, they would have no problem holding their own. Geralt nodded firmly. Understood, Your Highness. Good. You may go. Yes.
The 2 men bowed and departed. By now, the sky outside had already darkened.
Lucien stretched slightly, planning to retire for the night. Tomorrow would bring new matters to attend to.
But just as he stepped out of the hall, a timid voice called out.
Your Highness.
Lucien turned to see Megan standing nervously at the entrance, clutching her hands together. Megan, he said in mild surprise.
What's wrong? Did something happen at the ranch again?
She quickly shook her head.
No, no.
With Gyarados there, my brother and I are perfectly safe.
It's just...
Your Highness, all the grass seeds you asked me to plant have sprouted.
Lucien's eyes widened slightly. Already? Yes. Megan nodded excitedly. They grew so fast.
It's only been half a month, but the grass is already knee-high.
Lucien's expression softened with interest. He hadn't forgotten about the flock of Mareep.
Once fully grown, their wool could be woven into fabric, an important step toward his plan for a self-sustaining economy.
However, it was already late. After a moment's thought, he said gently, "I see. Good work, Megan. Get some rest for now, I'll come by the ranch to inspect things in the morning." "Yes, Your Highness," she said, bowing before hurrying off. Chapter 106, Mareep joins the ranch. The next morning, Lucien rose early. Today was a rest day. His Pokémon, having trained relentlessly for half a month, were finally allowed to sleep in. He glanced at the still slumbering Dratini and Servine curled up beside each other, then smiled faintly. Without waking them, he quietly took the already awake Larvesta and stepped outside. Garrido's ranch. Morning mist still lingered over the grassy pastures. Megan and her brother Chris were already hard at work. Chris hauled fresh hay to feed the two buffalo grazing near the fence, while Megan stood by the large pond, gently tending to the 6 Garridos that lived within. Overhead, Combi buzzed busily among the newly bloomed flowers, collecting nectar to bring back to their hives and turn into golden honey. "Good morning, Your Highness Lucien." Megan spotted him first and waved enthusiastically from across the field. "Good morning, Megan," Lucien greeted with a smile. Megan quickly said a few words to the Garridos, reminding them not to get too excited, then ran over to him, her boots kicking up dewdrops. "Please, follow me, Your Highness." The two crossed the ranch and arrived at a section fenced off with sturdy timber posts. Lucien paused. The area was now completely transformed, a carpet of lush green grass and colorful wildflowers stretched before them, glistening with dew beneath the morning sun. He even spotted a few lily and fungus wandering about among the swaying flowers. When the fungus noticed him, they startled and bounced away, rolling clumsily into the taller grass. "Monsters have started gathering here," Megan exclaimed, eyes wide with surprise and excitement. Lucien chuckled softly. "That only proves how well you've cared for this land." Both Lilip and Fungus were Pokémon that thrived only in healthy, fertile ecosystems. Their presence meant the soil here was rich and balanced, proof that the pasture was flourishing. "Don't worry about them," Lucien added. "They're just attracted to the flowers. They won't cause any trouble." Megan nodded eagerly. Even if they did, the Garridos would protect everyone. Lucien paused, blinking. 6 Garridos using Hyper Beam at once, even Geralt might not survive that. He decided not to comment. As his gaze wandered over the vibrant flower field, something caught his eye. Among the blossoms was a patch of pale pink flowers that looked strangely familiar. He knelt down, brushing his fingers over the petals, and the name surfaced in his mind. Gracidia flower, a flower native to the Sinnoh region. Traditionally gifted as a token of gratitude on special occasions. It's said to be beloved by the mythical Pokémon Shaman. Legend tells that when a field of Gracidia blooms beautifully, Shaman itself will appear to bless the land. Lucien's eyes widened slightly. Shaman, a mythical Pokémon from Sinnoh. What were Gracidia flowers doing here? "Your Highness, is something wrong?" Megan asked curiously when she noticed him staring at the blossoms. Lucien blinked, collecting his thoughts. "No, it's nothing serious," he said with a faint smile. "Now that the grass has fully grown, it's time to introduce a new group of monsters to your ranch. Wait here for me, I'll bring them over." "Yes, Your Highness," Megan replied with a bright grin. Lucien had already visited the gentle Mareep herd once before and knew exactly where to find them. It didn't take long to reach the hillside. There, beneath the golden sunlight, a flock of fluffy Mareep grazed quietly, their soft wool shimmering faintly with static. Lucien approached slowly, calling out, "Mareep, do you remember me?" The sheep Pokémon looked up at once, their round eyes blinking in recognition. Memories flickered. This was the human who had promised to grow fresh, tender grass for them to enjoy. "Reap," one of them bleated curiously, ears twitching. Seeing this, Lucien was delighted, the Mareep really did remember him. "The thing I told you about before," Lucien said with a smile, "it's ready now. Would you like to see it?" The Mareep looked up at him curiously.
They were intelligent Pokémon and could easily sense that the human before them harbored no ill intent. After a brief moment of consideration, they all bleated softly in agreement. Who could refuse such a generous offer, after all? One by one, the fluffy Mareep stood up from the hillside and followed Lucian and Larvesta toward Megan's Garridos ranch. Before long, they arrived at their destination. The moment they saw the lush green pasture within the fenced area, the Mareep's eyes lit up with joy. What rich, fresh grass! The human hadn't lied to them at all. With cheerful cries, the flock trotted straight into the field and began happily grazing, their wool crackling softly with static. Megan, who had been tending to the Garridos nearby, turned in surprise when she saw them. "Your Highness," she said uncertainly. Lucian smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry. These magical beasts are very gentle, they won't hurt anyone. Their name is Mareep. Their wool is extremely soft and perfect for making carpets and clothing." "Mareep," Megan repeated, her eyes widening with wonder as she watched the plump, fluffy creatures graze. "They're so cute, and so fluffy." The Mareep, full after eating their fill, soon lay lazily in the sunshine, their wool gleaming faintly with tiny sparks of electricity. Lucian walked closer, his tone gentle. "Mareep, how about staying here from now on? We'll provide you with food and safety. You won't need to fear other Pokémon here. All we ask is to collect the wool you shed naturally." Mareep, after shedding their fleece, would regrow it on their own. They didn't need shearing like Wooloo, whose wool grew endlessly. This made them ideal for beginners in ranching. Mareep. The flock bleated cheerfully, tails flicking. They had no intention of refusing such an offer. Here there was food, water, and warmth, far better than the dangers of the wild. Lucian smiled. Good. That's one more step forward for the territory. He gave Megan a few instructions on caring for the new residents, then left the ranch in her care, confident that she would bond with the Mareep in no time. At least, that's what he thought, until the next morning. When Megan arrived at the Lord's Hall the following day, she was cradling something carefully in her arms. "Your Highness Lucian," she called excitedly, her face flushed. "I found this in the Mareep pen this morning." Lucian turned, his eyes falling on the smooth, cream-colored egg with faint yellow patterns in her arms. Immediately, information surfaced in his mind. Mareep egg, a Pokémon egg laid by Mareep. After a period of incubation, a baby Mareep will hatch inside. Lucian smiled. That's a Mareep egg. After some time, a baby Mareep will hatch from it. Just like humans, monsters can reproduce, Garridos and Buffalin too. Megan blinked, trying to process this. Then she looked down at the egg with awe. Then, "Your Highness, how can I make it hatch?" "Take good care of it," Lucian said gently. "Keep it somewhere warm and soft, like on a blanket. And be careful, it's fragile. Monsters are intelligent creatures. Even inside their eggs, they can sense your emotions and hear your voice." "I'll take good care of it," Megan said earnestly, holding the egg a little closer. Lucian nodded approvingly. "Good. And if your Mareep lay more eggs than you can handle alone, you can share them with other ranchers. That way, more people can raise Mareep, and the territory's livestock will grow even faster. In this way, livestock farming within the territory can develop more quickly." Chapter 107, Dragonair. After seeing Megan off, Lucian sat quietly in the Lord's Hall, deep in thought. Everything in the territory was progressing steadily. At the ranch, the Combi and Mareep populations were thriving, the honey collected could be used for food, while the soft wool shed by Mareep was sent to skilled weavers to be made into carpets and warm clothing. Meanwhile, half of the territory's citizens were working tirelessly on the construction of the town. With the help of 2 Makok and a team of Darmanitan, the pace of building was faster than ever. In the mines, the workers, protected by Geralt and Anna, continued extracting ore without interruption. The knights under Geralt's command had also begun making contact with the Aran population, following Lucian's plan to establish a disciplined Pokémon Corps. But what pleased Lucien the most was something else entirely. More and more ordinary people, after witnessing Pokémon's power and gentleness firsthand, had begun to approach them willingly.
Some even started raising Mewtwo, finding joy in nurturing the small, harmless Pokémon.
Given enough time, Lucien believed this land could become the first place in the world where humans and Pokémon truly coexisted. A world where both could thrive together.
Time.
Lucien murmured softly to himself, resting his chin on his hand.
All I need is enough time.
Then, he could build a true utopian town, like those he once saw in the Pokémon anime of his past life. He opened the territory's management panel and scanned through the citizen list until his eyes stopped on Ivan's name.
Ivan had departed for Lacunosa town the previous day.
At his current pace, it would take about a week for him to arrive. Lucien then glanced toward the corner of his desk. 6 handmade Pokeballs, crafted from special berries, sat neatly lined up. Morik had delivered them early that morning, the result of several days of dedicated work. While they didn't have the advanced features of Pokeballs from the modern Pokémon world, no shrinking or auto-capture mechanism, they were functional enough for Lucien's needs.
Just then. Splash!
A sudden downpour began outside, heavy raindrops drumming against the rooftops.
Lucien blinked, startled. Rain?
He heard shouts from outside, the townsfolk scrambling to take shelter. Rising from his chair, he stepped toward the doorway with Larvesta, Dratini, and Servine following curiously behind.
What heavy rain! He muttered, peering up at the sky.
While others might have been troubled by the weather, Lucien knew it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, not with Larvesta by his side.
Larvesta, he said, smiling slightly, use sunny day. Vesta! Larvesta chirped, sparks flaring eagerly from its antennae. It was ready to perform. But before it could release the move, Lucien suddenly raised a hand. Wait! Larvesta tilted its head in confusion. Larv?
Lucien chuckled and patted its head.
Not yet. I just remembered, rainy weather is the perfect opportunity for Dratini to train its rain dance technique. He turned to the serpentine Pokémon beside him. Servine, Larvesta, return to your Pokeballs for now. I'll be training with Dratini by the river. Both nodded obediently before vanishing into their Pokeballs in a flash of light.
Lucien grabbed an umbrella and stepped into the rain, with Dratini slithering eagerly beside him. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and the sound of rushing water as they approached the riverbank. Lucien knelt down, watching the gentle ripples spread across the water.
Dratini, focus on the water-type energy around you. Feel the rhythm of the rain, let your aura resonate with it. Draw! Dratini dove into the river with a joyful cry, its sleek body gliding through the rain-kissed surface.
It tilted its head upward, feeling each raindrop strike its scales, sensing the moisture in the air.
Lucien stood beneath the umbrella, his voice steady but encouraging. Steady now. Concentrate.
Don't force it, just listen to the flow of nature itself. Immediately afterward, a surge of pure blue energy enveloped Dratini, and it blinked in surprise, looking around in wonder.
Is this the flow of water-type energy?
It could feel the living rhythm of the rain, the way the drops struck the surface, the hum of the current, the pulse of life that ran through every ripple.
Dratini closed its eyes and tried to resonate with that energy.
Perhaps it was the result of days of relentless training, but this time, the connection came easily.
The energy flowed through it, steady and smooth. Everything was going perfectly, until suddenly, it hit a wall. An invisible barrier stopped the flow. Dra.
Dratini strained, trying to push through, to deepen the connection, but no matter how hard it tried, the resonance refused to stabilize. A flicker of frustration rose in its heart.
Don't give up, Dratini.
Lucien's calm, confident voice carried across the rain-soaked air.
Believe in yourself, you can do it. Dratini froze, then lifted its head.
Lucien was standing on the riverbank, drenched from the rain, his umbrella forgotten at his side, but his gaze was filled with unwavering faith.
Dratini's heart thudded.
Lucien had always been there, patiently guiding it, training it, believing in it.
How could it let him down now?
Servine and Larvesta had both grown stronger.
Dratini didn't want to be left behind, it wanted to stand proudly beside them. No, ahead of them. It wanted Lucien to see it first.
That desire, that determination, that longing for acknowledgement, burst forth like a storm. A surge of emotion ignited deep within its chest, and at that instant, something broke. The barrier shattered. An invisible current roared outward, scattering the rain into a spiraling mist as a brilliant azure light erupted from Dratini's body. Lucien's eyes widened. This is... At first, he thought it was another molt, but no. The light wasn't shedding old skin, it was transforming. Evolution. Lucien's breath caught in his throat. Finally. The radiance flared brighter, illuminating the entire riverbank. Dratini's body stretched longer and sleeker, its scales took on a deep, sapphire blue sheen. When the light finally dimmed, a majestic serpentine Pokémon hovered before him, its white underbelly gleaming, a single ivory horn gracing its forehead, and delicate wings sprouting elegantly from each side of its head. 3 crystalline blue orbs glowed softly, one beneath its throat, 2 near the tip of its tail. Woo! Dragonair lifted its head, letting out a long, melodic cry that seemed to echo across the sky. In that instant, the rain and the very air itself began to stir, drawn toward it by some unseen force. From every direction, streams of pale, milky white wind gathered and flowed into the sapphire orb beneath Dragonair's neck. The orb shimmered faintly, releasing a gentle azure radiance as a rippling aura spread outward, wrapping Dragonair in a cloak of flowing energy. Lucien watched in awe as Dragonair turned its gaze skyward. Then, carried by the swirling currents, it soared gracefully into the air, its sleek, sapphire body cutting through the rain like a divine spirit ascending to the heavens. A moment later, the thick storm clouds above began to part, dispersing as if bowing to its presence. Through the opening in the clouds, a single beam of golden sunlight broke through, pouring down upon Dragonair, bathing it in a radiant halo. For a fleeting moment, Dragonair seemed almost celestial, a being of wind and light. The rain ceased. The wind stilled. Time itself felt as though it held its breath. Then, just as the sunlight touched its peak, a faint blue glow shimmered once more from Dragonair's scales. It twisted its elegant body midair, and in response, the scattered clouds began to reform. A moment later, a fine drizzle returned, soft and steady. Lucien's eyes widened in astonishment. This is rain dance. Dragonair had not only evolved, it had mastered rain dance, completely attuning itself to the rhythm of the weather. A surge of pride welled up in Lucien's chest as the majestic dragon descended, gliding effortlessly on the wind. It landed gracefully before him, its serpentine body coiling lightly on the wet ground. The air around it shimmered faintly, rippling with residual water-type energy. What incredible speed! Lucien murmured, genuinely impressed. But then he noticed something: the crystal orb beneath Dragonair's neck, which had glowed so brightly moments ago, was now dimming. Chapter 108, Aaron. Woo! Dragonair, wrapped in a current of swirling air, soared gracefully around Lucien. Its eyes were full of excitement. After all, it had finally evolved into a more powerful Pokémon. Now, it no longer had to worry about falling behind Servine and Larvesta. After flying in circles a few times, Dragonair stopped in front of Lucien. "Congratulations, Dragonair," Lucien said with a smile as he reached out and gently patted its head. He opened Dragonair's status panel, only to find that it had completely transformed. Pokémon, Dragonair. Type, Dragon. Gender, female. Ability. Marvel Scale. Moves: Wrap, Leer, Twister, Thunder Wave, Dragon Tail, Agility, Slam, Dragon Pulse, Rain Dance, Aqua Tail. Friendship, 100. Pokémon record, omitted. As expected, it's learned Rain Dance and Aqua Tail, Lucien murmured to himself. He asked Dragonair to demonstrate all of its moves while he stood off to the side, observing closely. Although Dragonair had evolved, its personality was still just as gentle and affectionate. The moment Lucien spoke, it obediently followed his command. The power of Wrap has increased, the dragon energy within Twister seems denser, the strength behind Dragon Tail and Slam has improved significantly, and Dragon Pulse has grown larger in scale, Lucian thought as he silently compared its abilities before and after evolution.
Indeed, evolution could bring an overwhelming transformation to a Pokémon's strength.
Not only had its power, speed, and endurance increased, but even its control over energy had become far more refined.
Thinking of this, Lucian's gaze fell upon the now dimmed orb beneath Dragonair's neck.
It was said that Dragonair stored immense energy within its body, channeling it into the crystal-like orbs on its neck and tail to manipulate the weather. When the orbs glowed faintly, the surrounding weather would change accordingly. Because of this, Dragonair was once revered by farmers as the guardian of the skies, the one who governed the weather. And now, that ancient legend didn't seem so far-fetched. Judging from Dragonair's recent performance, it clearly possessed the power to manipulate air currents. Air currents was a broad term. In some RPGs, it was referred to simply as wind, but in the Pokémon world, it was known as flying-type energy. The most famous example was Lugia, the legendary Pokémon said to control both ocean currents and hurricanes. Because it dwelled in the sea, it was also known as Lugia, the Sea Guardian.
Dragonair, can you still change the weather right now? Lucian asked.
Woo, Dragonair shook its head, lowering its gaze toward the orb beneath its neck. As I thought, Lucian mused. The dimmed light means your energy is depleted, you won't be able to influence the weather again for a while. He wasn't worried, though. Even if it couldn't do it now, with consistent training and growth, one day it would be able to freely control the weather within a certain range. What surprised Lucian even more, however, was that Dragonair could now fly. That alone greatly increased its mobility, giving it many more tactical options in battle. At that moment, the rain stopped.
The sky cleared once more.
Lucian looked up, estimating the duration of the rainfall in his mind. About 15 minutes, he murmured.
Not bad. For just having learned Rain Dance, lasting 15 minutes is already excellent. In the future, if we ever face heat or drought, we can use this method to bring rain artificially. And if the weather turns extreme, Dragonair can use the energy stored in its orb to disperse the clouds and restore balance. Let's keep working hard together, Dragonair. Lucian's eyes shone with anticipation.
Once Dragonair evolved into Dragonite, he would finally be able to ride it and soar freely across the skies.
Woo!
Dragonair happily narrowed its eyes and gave Lucian a high-five with its tail. Yet more than anything else, what made Lucian happiest was this: with Larvesta hatched, Snivy evolved into Servine, and Dratini now evolved into Dragonair, he finally possessed enough fighting strength to explore the lands beyond his borders.
At the same time, on the mountainside.
Under Geralt's command, all 70 knights of the territory had gathered at the mine, facing a group of steel-gray magical beasts known as Aaron.
Geralt stood tall beside his Haxorus, the dragon's twin axes gleaming in the sunlight.
Within his order, 70 knights served under him, and so far, only 2 had succeeded in forming a bond by luring 2 particularly gluttonous Aaron with food. But that still left 68 without partners.
There were only about 20 Aaron in the entire area.
Even if 2 knights shared one, the numbers were clearly not enough. Still, completing His Highness Lucian's command came first. Geralt's deep, steady voice carried across the clearing.
Do you all remember the method I taught you before?
Yes, sir, the knights shouted in unison.
Good, Geralt said firmly. Remember this well: humans and magical beasts are not enemies.
We share this world together.
Do not act with fear. Treat them with respect and sincerity.
At his words, the knights' expressions varied, some looked excited, others nervous. A few glanced at the imposing Haxorus standing beside Geralt, their eyes burning with admiration and yearning. Could they really, one day, tame such powerful creatures as their lord had?
While some hesitated, others began to move. A young knight stepped forward toward a lone Aaron. Following Geralt's instructions, he called out, "Of Aaron."
The wild Aaron looked up, its metallic head tilting slightly. It didn't attack, its small, dark eyes blinked curiously.
"Please, become my partner,"
the knight said, summoning his courage. I'll make sure you have all the iron ore you can eat, and I'll train with you every day. Together, we'll grow stronger.
He swallowed nervously after saying that.
The Aran's eyes lit up with interest. But instead of stepping closer, it lowered its head and took a battle stance, testing the knight, as if to say, "Show me your strength. Prove that you're worthy of me." Unfortunately, the young knight failed to understand the signal. Seeing this, Gerald called out sharply, "Tim! Prepare for battle."
"Ah, why yes, sir."
The knight named Tim hurriedly drew his weapon, an iron sword, its blade honed to a sharp, cold sheen. But then, realizing what he was about to do, he hesitated and quickly sheathed it again. He was here to befriend this creature, not harm it. If his sword injured Aran, it would defeat the purpose entirely. So Tim tossed his iron sword aside, flexed his wrists, and decided to fight the Aran barehanded.
"Come on," he shouted.
The Aran lowered its head and charged straight at him. Tim braced himself, trying to block it, but for such a small creature, its strength was shocking. It broke through his guard instantly and slammed its steel head into his stomach.
Ugh!
Tim was sent tumbling backward, landing hard on the ground with a look of disbelief. "As such strength," he gasped.
But the fight wasn't over yet.
He clenched his fists and swung at the Aran, only for his punch to crash uselessly against its iron armor.
Pain shot up his arm.
Tim's eyes widened, and he leapt up clutching his bruised hand, howling in pain.
"Ah!" And as if the humiliation weren't enough, another Aran casually trotted over to the discarded sword beside him. It opened its jaws and crunch bit straight into the blade, effortlessly chewing and swallowing the metal. Geralt. Chapter 109, Swablu Region. So that's how it went.
In the Lord's Hall, Geralt finished his report, standing stiffly before Lucian. Lucian rubbed his temples in silence. As expected, letting novice knights raise Aran might have been a bit too ambitious. Even though his knights possessed strength and discipline, against the steel-bodied Aran, they were completely helpless, swords couldn't pierce its armor, and bare fists only ended up bruised and broken.
After a brief moment of contemplation, Lucian asked, "How many Aran did you manage to capture in total?"
10, Geralt replied promptly.
"Oh?" Lucian raised an eyebrow. "That's better than I expected. Did someone actually manage to defeat one?" "How?" Geralt nodded. The later knights realized something. Since iron swords couldn't hurt the Aran, maybe blunt weapons like hammers could at least stun them. So we borrowed hammers from the blacksmiths and tried again. The results were surprisingly good. Some Aran fainted from the impact, and when they woke up, they agreed to follow us. Lucian's mouth twitched slightly. That was certainly an ancient and rather barbaric method, but it worked. "But there's another problem, Your Highness," Geralt added. "What is it?" "We have 70 knights, but only 20 Aran live in that mining area." Lucian crossed his arms, falling into thought. "In that case, we'll need to form other magical beast legions." He began running through the possibilities in his mind. Gyarados? No, Magikarp are too weak, and too difficult for ordinary people to raise. Golduck? That could work. They can attack with Hydro Pump or use psychic powers like telekinesis to restrain enemies. In the games, psychic moves weren't always dominant, but in reality, psychic energy was practically unbeatable except against natural counters, just like Sabrina's overwhelming strength in the anime. Magnemite? That would be even better. When evolved into Magneton, they could unleash devastating electromagnetic blasts or wide-area discharge attacks. Plus, they could fly. Unfortunately, Magnemite were rare around this region. If that failed, Mareep could be used instead. Once they evolved into Ampharos, they could serve as powerful substitutes. Domesticated Mareep were docile, and those hatched from eggs would be easier to train and bond with. Then there was the idea of a Swablu Legion. Many wild Swablu lived near the borders of his territory. When they evolved into Altaria, their destructive potential was immense. They could devastate large areas with Hurricane or even the legendary Draco Meteor.
Their gentle temperament made them ideal companions for knights as well.
Lucian's eyes lit up as his plan took shape.
In that case, he declared, let's change our approach.
We'll form new partnerships with other magical beasts. Gerald blinked, momentarily stunned.
Lucian drew out a parchment showing a sketch of a small, cloud-winged bird. Gerald leaned in. It was a soft blue creature with downy white wings that looked like flowing clouds, and 2 long blue feathers on its head.
What is this? It's called Swablu, Lucian explained. You've likely seen them before. Since spring began, flocks of Swablu have often flown over our town, perching on rooftops and watching people from above. It's a gentle and harmless magical beast. Far easier to befriend than Aaron. Gerald frowned slightly, still concerned. But if the knights bond with different types of magical beasts, won't training them together be difficult? Lucian smiled knowingly. No one ever said a person can only have one magical beast. His eyes gleamed. They are all our wings. Gerald froze for a moment, then realization dawned on his face. Lucian continued, besides, magical beasts can reproduce, just like humans. If 2 bonded beasts lay eggs, we can give those eggs to other riders. That way, new recruits can train them more easily, share experiences, and grow faster. Gerald's eyes widened. Your Highness is truly wise. Afterwards, he could slowly expand the army, recruit soldiers, and distribute the prepared Pokémon eggs to them. By repeating this process, a powerful army could be built in a short time. All right, you may return now, Lucian said calmly, and take some of the men to begin contacting the Swablu. I'll record their traits and proper breeding methods for you later. Gerald saluted crisply. Yes, Your Highness. As it turned out, compared to the hard-headed Aaron, the Swablu were much easier to befriend. Within just 3 days, Gerald sent word that they had successfully tamed several of the gentle birds using food and soft voices. So, under Gerald's lead, Lucian set out for the knight's training grounds, a wide clearing deep in the forest. When he arrived, 69 knights, Gerald excluded, were already assembled in formation, clad in polished armor with their swords at their sides, standing proudly at attention. The sight before him made Lucian pause. The knights were divided into 2 groups. One group was surrounded by small, iron-gray Aaron. The other had Swablu perched right on their heads, fluffy white wings draped like clouds, looking almost like little hats. For a moment, Lucian couldn't help but imagine the future when these creatures evolved. The Aaron would grow into towering, steel-plated Agron, their massive forms capable of shaking the earth. The Swablu, meanwhile, would become elegant Altaria, gliding through the sky like living clouds, their songs echoing across the land. Just picturing it stirred excitement in his chest. Yes, this was something truly worth looking forward to. Though every night there was a grown man, most over 20, their eyes sparkled like children who had just been given their first toys. They had done it, they had truly tamed monsters. Just like the legendary beast tamers who once visited the royal capital, proud, noble, and awe-inspiring. Now, every knight turned toward Lucian, waiting for him to speak. He took a slow breath, sweeping his gaze over the gathered men before speaking in a clear, steady tone. In this world, monsters can be found everywhere, in the sky, in the sea, in the forests, and even in the deserts. Humans and monsters alike are both children of this land. After spending time with them, you must have realized, monsters, like us, have intelligence, emotions, and hearts of their own. Here, people and monsters will play together, fight together, help one another, and build a home together. The crowd stood silent, his words echoing softly through the trees. And as they listened, vivid scenes appeared in their minds. Snover playing tag with laughing children, Dugtrio tilling the soil beside farmers, Macamp chopping wood and helping raise walls, Darmanitan lighting hearths at dawn, Combi gathering nectar among the flowers, and Petalo carrying bundles of herbs to the healers. Human and monsters, side by side, slowly shaping a new home. Unknowingly, they had already lived among these creatures for so long. And as the realization dawned, many knights felt a warmth rise in their chests. Chapter 110. Humans and Monsters. I've been thinking, Lucian said as he slowly paced before the assembled knights and their Pokémon.
His voice, calm yet solemn, carried easily through the clearing.
What is the meaning of our existence, as humans and as magical beasts?
He paused, his gaze sweeping across the faces of men and creatures alike.
For countless years, wars between humans and magical beasts have never ceased. Blood has been spilled, tears have fallen. Families have been torn apart. Beasts have perished on battlefields drenched in smoke and fire. Lucien's tone softened. I don't believe either side truly wishes for this suffering.
He stopped walking, straightening his posture as a faint wind brushed past the gathering.
And now, I think I've finally found the answer.
He raised his voice slightly, conviction resonating with every word.
Humans and magical beasts have never been enemies. We are both children of this same world. Even if conflicts arise now and then, they will always fade, and peace will follow.
Lucien gestured with one hand. Imagine this: when winter comes and firewood runs short, a fire-type beast steps forward to light your hearth. Or for you beasts, when the snow piles high, when your bellies grow empty and you find no food, there will be humans who share their bread with you, who help you survive the bitter cold.
Humans and magical beasts are not enemies. This bond between us should not be one of exploitation, enslavement, or dominance.
It should be one of companionship, of mutual care, of trust, of family. The knights below listened intently, and even the Pokémon beside them seemed to understand. They turned to look at their partners, at the steel-armored Aaron beside them, at the fluffy Swablu perched on their shoulders. Memories surfaced, training together, patrolling side by side, sharing fruit at dusk.
The beasts keeping watch through the night while their human partners slept.
It had only been a short time since they'd met, but the warmth they shared felt as if it had been there forever. The Aaron remembered how the humans had scoured the mines to find them better, tastier ores. The Swablu recalled being gently brushed, its soft feathers groomed with care, allowed to rest upon a knight's head like a crown of clouds.
They loved this place. They loved these humans.
But then, Lucien's tone changed. He looked toward the horizon, his expression grave. A war that will engulf the entire Unova region is drawing near, he said quietly.
Sooner or later, its flames will reach even this land.
When that day comes, the kingdom's armies will trample the homes we've built together, burn the orchards we've planted, and enslave both humans and magical beasts alike, locking us away in darkness where no sunlight reaches. A low murmur spread among the crowd. Anger and fear flashed in every pair of eyes.
Chirp! A Swablu cried out indignantly, fluttering its wings in protest.
Lucien smiled faintly but continued, his voice now resolute and powerful.
That is why, to protect our home, to ensure our children and their children can live freely and peacefully on this land, I ask all of you to train harder, to become stronger, and to fight for the future we share.
Protect our homeland, one knight shouted.
Protect our homeland. Soon, the entire clearing echoed with the chant. Protect our homeland. Protect our homeland. Even the Pokémon joined in, chirp.
Chirp, their voices blending with the humans, creating a single, roaring vow that rose into the sky.
Not far away, the old butler relief stood silently, watching the scene.
His hands trembled slightly as tears welled up in his eyes.
Your Majesty, he whispered under his breath, if only you could see this.
His Highness has truly grown. 20 Aaron and 50 Swablu, such a number of Pokémon demanded an enormous amount of resources every single day. Swablu were manageable, their diet consisted mostly of berries, fruit, and the occasional loaf of bread. Aaron, however, were another matter entirely. Although they could eat berries if necessary, they much preferred metal. To forge an invincible Pokémon army, Lucien would have to pour a great deal of resources into his military forces. But there was no helping it, these were not peaceful times. Without sufficient strength, they wouldn't survive the coming clash between reality and ideals. As he pondered the problem, Lucien picked up his pen and began recording detailed information about Aaron and Swablu, their habitats, temperaments, and training methods, on a sheet of parchment. Aaron, being steel and rock-type Pokémon, loved feeding on iron ore. They could absorb the metallic elements and convert them into nutrients, reinforcing their armor-like bodies and making their steel shells even harder. They possessed extraordinary strength and defense, so their training regimen needed to emphasize power and endurance. Lucien listed several ideas: weighted runs, waterfall resistance training, striking wooden pillars 100 times daily, move practice, and controlled combat exercises. Altaria, the evolved form of Swablu, were naturally gifted in special defense and mobility. They could master wide-area attacks like Draco Meteor and even carry a human rider, making them the perfect fast-response aerial units. Therefore, Swablu training would focus on stamina, coordination with their riders, and precision in executing moves. Combining fragments of the original Lucien's memories with modern training principles from his past life, he soon outlined 2 specialized Pokémon training programs, one for ground units, one for aerial forces.
But there was another matter to address: Pokeballs.
Their invention marked a monumental step forward in the relationship between humans and Pokémon. From a military standpoint, they were an invaluable strategic resource, allowing soldiers to carry multiple large Pokémon with ease and unleash them instantly in battle. Lucien could vividly imagine it: 2 armies clashing on the field, and then one side suddenly throwing dozens of Pokeballs into the air.
In a flash of light, entire squadrons of Pokémon appeared, their attacks raining devastation on the enemy lines.
That, he thought, would change the course of any war. Once he finished writing, Lucien handed the parchment to Geralt. "From now on," he said, "you'll be responsible for overseeing the army's training."
Geralt bowed. The knight was loyal, disciplined to the point of rigidity. His unwavering dedication made him one of Lucien's most trusted subordinates.
Lucien was still immersed in his thoughts when Elif, the old steward, entered the hall and bowed.
"Your Highness, our territory is gradually taking shape," the butler said. "Should we not officially give it a name?" Lucien paused. A name? Indeed, that was something that needed to be decided. Merchants had already begun referring to their settlement as that territory when traveling between towns. They couldn't go on like that forever. But, what should it be called? Elif cleared his throat. "Your Highness, perhaps you might name it Lucien Territory. Once the town is complete, it could become Lucien Town, and when the castle rises, Lucien City." Lucien.
He could already picture it, 1,000 years later, people still calling this place Lucien City.
Although, come to think of it, wasn't there a Lucien Town in Unova's ancient records?
He wasn't entirely sure if there was a connection, but the coincidence made him chuckle inwardly. Still, naming it after himself felt a bit too self-indulgent.
"We'll decide later," Lucien said after a moment's thought. "The town isn't even complete yet."
That wraps up this part of What If Transmigrated to a Medieval Pokémon World.
Thanks so much for listening.
As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well.
See you in the next one.